Hey guys, welcome to Book Review 151. Today I am going to be reviewing Little Rice, Smartphones, Xiaomi, and the Chinese Dream by Clay Shirky. Okay, so this thin volume is about the company Xiaomi. Now, if you're in the United States, you probably, unless you're a tech geek, you probably have not heard of this company. But they actually have emerged in starting in China, but in really large parts of the developing world um, as the third alternative to Android and Apple devices um, in terms of operating systems, and have actually even branched out into phones and making their own phones. Um, well, how did this happen? Well, one thing you got to factor is that the move from sort of flip phones or you know, type in button phones to smartphones moved very rapidly, particularly considering how deep the penetration was across the world. Um, a lot of people didn't see this happening, particularly in a market like China, that, as the book mentions, people tend to be very cost thrifty. Um, but essentially, what happened is that the technology kind of outpaced what people thought, and so there was sort of this, wide open market that wasn't, or that was there, that needed to be filled. Um, Now, a product like Apple, sort of like the premium brand, was out of the price range of a lot of these people. Not necessarily that they couldn't afford an Apple product, but Xiaomi was maybe for a similar type of brand was is 30% less than Apple products. But that's not actually how Xiaomi got their start. Xiaomi, pronouncing that right, Xiaomi, Xiaomi, I believe, um, didn't even start in the hardware of the phone business at all, but actually started as the operating system for phones. Well, how did they break this market if they weren't making their own phones? Well, they couldn't break it through Apple because the only operating system that you can run on the hardware part of an Apple phone is Apple products. But because Android services multiple companies, LG, HTC, and the big one, Samsung, um, it's actually possible to change your operating system on one of those types of phones. So, sort of tech geeks, particularly in China, who already had either Samsungs or one of these other types of phones, or even like one maybe that you hadn't heard of, but still use Android. People were essentially able to take Android off their phone and put the Xiaomi operating system onto their phone. Now, why exactly in the book does it say that Xiaomi uh, came to prominence in China? Well, first is they got a very hardcore following, which I believe there's two types. There's the flood type, which is like the general public, but they used another type, the Xiaomi internally within their company. Uh, it's like the fire fans or something like that, that obsess over everything in the operating system. Um, Let me think here. Yeah, so they essentially built up this very strong audience. They were also very interactive with this audience. Something very early on was that it's almost like the customers were helping build the company. And it was mentioned in the book also that there are a very limited number of different industries, and they tend to be kind of niche industries, uh, cell phones being probably the largest, where the consumer often knows more than the producer of, say, like an individual brand. The consumer will know more about the spectrum of what is considered a high quality brand than the producer will. Other types mentioned were mountain climbing, I think maybe basically anything where you have like a fan or a consumer base where they vastly care about the product that they're consuming. Um, and so these sort of rabid fans were able to kind of interact. The second part is that Xiaomi continually updated their software, just kind of inch by inch, not like big updates, like completely changing the operating system, but kind of it was a continual process. And something mentioned in the book is okay for now, get better later. Now you would think that the okay for now brand wouldn't be great. It would they lose their initial market because somebody with a better reputation could, say that we have this better thing and sell them to these people. But considering that, I think initially, changing the operating system on the computer was free, so Xiaomi allowed it for free, which essentially meant that you didn't have to convince the consumer at the start uh, that you'd have a great product right out of the gate. You can just convince them that you have a serviceable product, and then kind of continually improve until you actually have, in many instances, a better operating system than Android or what Apple could provide. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it is better than Android and Apple, but it's just that kind of continual interaction, continually get better, not really worry about the money making end until the end of it. Something else that helped them out, certainly China is a unique market, both with, I believe, Apple products and Android products. They have to make separate operating systems that specifically are used, if you will, I guess, by the Chinese public. There is no, and this is required by law by the Chinese government. Obviously, Apple and Android would never do this on their own accord, but if they want to be in the market in China, they essentially have to play by the rules of China. But because their sort of focus is split between their larger market, which is the rest of the world, and their Chinese market, maybe their Chinese market doesn't get quite as much attention with Apple and Android as the rest of the world does, whereas Xiaomi could specifically focus on kind of what the Chinese government required in terms of their firewall and that sort of thing. It also helped that by sort of playing ball with the Chinese government, Xiaomi was essentially, they didn't get free advertising, but what they did do is anytime they wanted to, they actually, excuse me, don't have traditional forms of advertising, but any sort of social media that might be locked down in the Great Firewall, as sort of the internet censorship firewall of China is called, would not, anything by Xiaomi would probably not be blocked. Whereas it's not necessarily going to be blocked by other products, but it's going to more raise a red flag and potential prevent sort of like a mass movement towards a particular cell phone, because that would be something that the Chinese government, because these countries produce their operating systems outside of the United States, or outside the United States, outside of China, essentially can only control once that product gets into China. Whereas because Xiaomi is within China, they can have not direct control, but direct interaction with what their requirements are within China. Now, Xiaomi has essentially had problems after it's moved out of China. So it's sort of the irony of their success within China is that now they have to have a couple different types of operating systems. One that allows certain things in China, and one that's more, say, free-flowing to the rest of the internet, or doesn't have to deal with the Great Firewall within China. Those are products that are operating systems, and then later hardware products that they're selling to India, Indonesia, South Korea, just a whole host, Thailand, a whole host of countries that are looking for fairly affordable products. Yeah, so Xiaomi essentially caught that middle niche. and really exploited it to the point where they've kind of, I'm sure I've missed quite a bit of everything they did. There's a lot of examples about how they really locked down their spot within their individual market. Um, but yeah, so the Xiaomi Mi. Also, there's a reason that they exist, can kind of exist in China and in some other countries that are developing countries, but aren't really popular in the first world, is because the first world tends to have more um, strict rules when it comes to copywriting and trademarking and well, essentially, uh, Xiaomi does not like directly copy what like the iPhone would be, although the the Mi 4, I believe, is actually very kind of close to the Apple 6, but it's they probably have to go through more litigation in order to get these cell phones legalized, if you want to call it that, in the first world. So they really concentrate on other markets. Um, yeah, I kind of mentioned how they initially got their software and they got their hardware. Um, Kind of how they interacted with China and the Great Firewall. So I'd say that's probably what the majority of the book covers. I'm sure I missed something. I'm sure I apologize if I did not say everything that needs to be said. Let's see if in the index. Smartphones. Smartphones, internet, Xiaomi, China, Apple, the maker movement. What was the maker movement? Uh, Essentially, that was, I guess, how um, you can move quicker by having hardware that is adaptable, and then putting it into whatever software, which can quickly be updated by the internet, or just as you would do regular updates, um, and how that's essentially kind of changing to Xiaomi's advantage, and how the market will eventually be all that. The Chinese Dream and Chinese Copycat. Okay, so Little Rice, Smartphones, Xiaomi, and the Chinese Dream by Clay Shirky. Good book. If you're a tech geek and you like China and you like seeing sort of the social phenomenon that is technology in China, check this book out. All right, bye, you guys.